Hello and welcome to the Voice Extra podcast. Today I am here with writer, music photographer, and synchronized swimmer.
Sophie McCarthy.
How are you doing today, Sophie?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Today's not the best weather day. So, Sophie, what would you be doing today if you weren't at home?
If I wasn't at home, I was supposed to be in Cannes for a international music industry convention. So it's a bit sad that I can't be there, but they've had like an online version full of like broadcasted like panels and all of that kind of stuff. So that's what I've been occupying myself with this week while reminiscing that I can't be in the south of France in the sun, basically.
Wait, how is that online stuff? Is it good?
It's been okay. Some of it's been really good. So they've had to tailor the original program. So a lot of it has been to do with how the music industry has coped with coronavirus.
Yeah.
And as a brief spoiler alert, live music's just not coped at all. It's just
Yeah.
stopped. Just doesn't exist at the moment. But yeah, no, it's still been good. There's still been some of like the original panels to do with like streaming and like legal stuff,
Yeah.
which has been fun. And then a lot of the live summits that were supposed to happen has just basically been about how are we going to stop this from happening when there's another pandemic in the future.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that's where I was supposed to be this week, but I'm
Mhm.
but I'm stuck at home instead.
Yeah. That's fair. So what sort of stuff have you been like watching or reading or like listening to get through this time?
Oh gosh. I mean there's been a bunch of new music out. The
Yeah.
1975 brought out their fourth album. So I've been listening to that a little bit. I'm still not its biggest fan, which I feel is a bit of a controversial statement because everyone else seems to love it. And then there's also been a lot of, I don't want to say drama, but there has been a few controversial statements made by the band to do with coronavirus and what's
Oh
happened
no.
in America with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. So it
Yeesh.
has been a bit of a mess.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds messy.
so I've been talking about this a lot with some of my friends when way back when in March, which feels like it was another decade or century ago at this point. Um, I I normally live in London in term time for university and stuff and for work, and I moved out of
Yeah.
London on the 17th to come and live at my family house in the countryside to try and avoid getting coronavirus, basically. But yeah, so I moved out of London on the 17th of March,
Hmm.
and it was, I remember I was like in the car on the way home, and the lead singer of the 1975, Matty Healy, basically
Hmm.
tweeted because obviously because the music industry almost shut down overnight for like live shows, and the way that the music industry has kind of like morphed because of streaming, it's basically
Yeah.
meant that the value of like actual like music has really like decreased. So
Yeah.
you used to pay like £10 to £15 for an album on CD, or if like a band released a single, it would still be released on a CD, and you still end up paying like £5 for a single and like a couple of like demos that they put on the
Hmm.
CD or something. Whereas like now, Spotify literally pays an artist like 0.007p per stream. So
Yeah.
artists don't get money from like people listening to their music anymore. Most artists only really make money by touring and selling tickets for like live shows.
Yeah.
So basically when coronavirus happened, loads of like small independent artists who normally make a living from music and by playing live shows were like, I'm not going to have any money and I need to pay rent and eat food. So a lot of these independent artists have like Bandcamp links, so started like tweeting them saying, guys, like if you can like chip in, like here's my Bandcamp link, feel free to like tip me, I've got some merch, you can buy my music, like I don't really know how I'm going to get through the next few months. And it was really quite it was quite a really it was a really serious situation basically. And then international rock
Yeah.
star Matty Healy rocks up onto his Twitter account and is like, "Oh, shut up, Laura! I don't care about your zine bundle on your Bandcamp," which you
Oh,
could, yeah. So that didn't really go down very well, and it essentially just ended up with him being like, "Oh, sorry, not sorry." And then loads of people had a go at him again, and then he was like,
oh.
"Guys, calm down. I literally run an independent record label," which which just
If he
isn't.
runs an independent record label, isn't that not exactly good form for him to then be like saying stuff like that? Or
Yeah,
yeah,
so if he did own an independent record label, it wouldn't be good form for him to be talking like that anyway. But the record label that he co-owns with their manager Jamie Oborn isn't in any in all the ways that count. It's not an independent record label. Like
oh
when I yeah. So when I talk about an independent record label, you'll be like, "Oh, it's like smaller artists and they don't have anything to do with major labels under like Universal, Sony and Warner. They release all of their music independently and it's all very like small scale and they care about artists and it's all of those like connotations that come along with independent record label."
yeah,
They have a record label called Dirty Hit, but all of their music, so they have artists that signed to Dirty Hit, and any music that any of these artists release is released under an exclusive license with Polydor Records, which basically
hmm,
means that all of the rights to the recorded copyright are owned by Polydor Records. So
ooh,
Polydor Records pay for the marketing and pay and like do all the distribution for them.
yeah.
Polydor Records is part of Universal Music, so it's not
Oh,
it's
so
not an
not
independent
independent.
label. And it's I have to I do have to give them some credit because the way that they've marketed it is actually quite clever because they're like, "Oh, it's an independent record label and we care about all of our artists and we're a family," and all of these like lovely kind of connotations that you would associate with a independent record label that is an independent record label. But it's not. And just as to kind of like give an example, Harry Styles. No person on this planet who knows who Harry Styles is would argue that he's an independent artist, right?
No way.
Yeah. So Harry Styles actually has his own record label called Erskine Records, and it's named after his house in London. So it has meaning, and it's all soft and fluffy, like Dirty
Yeah,
Hit, and an independent record label. If you go on Spotify and you click on any of his albums that he's released as a solo artist, and you scroll down to the bottom where you can find all the copyright information, it's Erskine Records via exclusive license to Columbia Records.
right.
Everyone thinks
So
that Harry's signed to Columbia Records, but everyone thinks that the 1975 is signed to Dirty Hit. And I'm just like, it's a very clever marketing trick because no one would say that Harry Styles is an independent artist, but so many
yeah,
people would say that the 1975 are an independent band.
got it.
So that's basically what started loads of controversy at the start of lockdown. Um, and then it all kind of just gets worse. And then in response to George Floyd being murdered by police in America, instead of writing a genuinely like heartfelt statement about what he thought about it and how wrong it is and what he's going to do to like change as a person and X, Y, and Z, whatever. He just posts a link to one of their songs
Oh, I
on
remember
YouTube.
this.
Yeah. So way back, like a year and a half ago, God, it must have been like summer 2018. They released a song called Love It If We Made It. And the whole kind of like backstory to the song is that when they were like touring America through 2016 and 2017, they basically got newspapers every single day, and they just wrote down like loads of different headlines, and then basically tried to take all of these different headlines and put them like into a song. So it's supposed to be this really like culturally relevant woke indie song. And there's like two lines in it that relates specifically to like Black Lives Matter. It's like selling melanin and then suffocate the black men, start with misdemeanors and we'll make a business out of them.
Yeah.
So it like you can argue that those two lines, all he needed to do was just tweet those two lines of lyrics from his song if he was worried in any way that whatever he was going to say would have been taken out of context or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And all of his fans would have known that that's from one of his songs. You know what I mean? You don't need to promote one of your own songs to profit from the death of a black
That
man in
feels
the
very
States.
weird.
So then he basically deletes this tweet and then is like, oh, I deleted my tweet in case anyone got offended. I didn't want to make it about me, but that says more than I could ever have eloquently said here on Twitter. You can tell that I got very irked by this whole situation. And then, like 10 minutes later, posts a link to the song again on their Spotify or YouTube. I can't remember which way around it was. He posted a link to it first on Spotify or YouTube and then deleted the tweet, apologized, and then tweeted another link to it on YouTube.
Oh my god.
Like you couldn't make it up if you tried. Like that's genuinely how bad it is. And then while all of this is going on his own like personal, if you could say that, Twitter account, their independent record label start tweeting about Black Lives Matter and everything. And I could genuinely only describe it as the most frantic like PR disaster. Like we're just gonna retweet every single Black Lives Matter tweet, every single petition, like as soon as this happened. Like they hadn't done it before. It was only after this like happened, which completely defeats the point of doing it.
Yeah.
And it just came across as really empty. And then I remember they tweeted, oh, you know, we're trying to better ourselves and we want to hire more like ethnic minorities onto our teams. So, you know, like creatives, collaborators, come and work with us. Here's our email kind of thing, which is definitely a good way to try and solve the situation. But they have so many ethnic minority artists on their label that don't get promoted already. And you could talk like so many of them have been cribbing up about it on Twitter, basically saying, why are you hiring more people into your workplace to try and fix this like diversity issue when you're not addressing like the actual like systemic issues in the way that those ethnic minority staff and artists are treated by your label. Which is a way that, a lot of corporations do it. And it's something the music industry's kind of started doing a lot, is like a lot of labels will hire ethnic minority staff. But if you look at like executives and like towards the top level of all of these like labels, you don't see any of these ethnic minorities there. It's a step in the right direction for sure. Like I'm not going to say that, oh, they shouldn't be doing it, because they should be doing it. But what actually needs to happen to actually create like lasting change?
Yeah. I think I've seen like a lot on Twitter. Basically, every time some company or corporation tries to be like, which isn't already very clearly like pro black people and minorities in their workplace, tries to come out with a statement, people just come with, oh, you did this in the past, you did this in the past, you did this to me here, because a lot of them want to like have the aesthetic of progressiveness.
It's like when it's like Pride Month at the moment, and if like coronavirus and everything like wasn't a thing, you'd like walk around like Oxford Circus, like in June, literally looks like a rainbow's all over Oxford Circus. But like any other time of the year,
Yeah.
it's not like that, and it's just full of all of these massive like fashion brands and like beauty brands like
Hmm.
making like pride palettes because we support the LGBTQ plus community, but only when you give us our money, which is just problematic. It's like
Yeah.
you can't. I just have such a personal issue when massive brands jump on top of like activism trends, because it, to me anyway, it never comes across as like
Yeah.
authentic. I'm like, if you truly believe this, like you wouldn't have to be shouting about it from the rooftops and sending out press releases about everything you're doing for like Pride Month
Hmm.
or Black Lives Matter. Like it should just be evident in the way that you do your business ordinarily, basically. So yeah, that's my opinion on that, basically.
Hmm. No, I definitely agree with you there. Especially, think part of what you can see in a sense is that now it is Pride Month, but because essentially there aren't like the parades and there's not as much of the like attention given to Pride related stuff, a lot of these brands which you normally see doing rainbows and whatever in June have suddenly just not. Yeah, it's just like it's not.
Yeah,
There's no
exactly.
like float for them to put their logo on or whatever. So they've just decided, oh yeah, like
Like
queer
there's
people
no
don't
Pride
exist.
parade to sponsor, so oops.
Yeah, sorry, Barclays.
I was
No. There's
literally
no
about to
Pride
talk
this
about
June.
Barclays. Oh, great minds think alike. I've kind of been listening to. Oh, I know. Enter Shikari.
Yeah,
I don't know whether you know about
I know Into Chicago. I do
Yeah,
know Into Chicago.
yeah. Enter Shikari brought out an album probably like a month ago now. I mean, anything I say in this, like timeline wise, just take it at face value because time has just become a bit
Yeah.
meaningless in lockdown, and I have absolutely no awareness of the concept that's time. But I think they brought it out about a month ago, and it's just so good. Like
Hmm.
as like a whole piece, as like a thing that you'd like sit down and like listen to as like an experience. That sounds so cringy, and I hate it when I talk about listening to albums and it being an experience. But like it is.
Yeah.
So like a load of artists now, there's like this massive trend in music that's like people don't listen to albums anymore. Like kids don't listen to albums. So I'm just gonna release loads of singles. Like
Yes.
there are so many, like when I was working right last year at a management company, and there was this meeting that was like a 3 hour long meeting with
Hmm.
me and like the two other like guys that like ran it, and they were talking about their like main band, and they were like, yeah, they're going to sit down and they're going to do some writing, and we need like ideas like for the next album. And then the other guy was like, album, no one listens to albums anymore. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, but people who don't listen to albums listen to like mainstream like pop music, so of course they're not going to listen to an album. They just want like, you just want something that you can like consume quickly.
Yeah.
But this band was like a super like alternative like indie band, and it
Oh,
was,
old people listen to albums. Yeah.
yeah.
Like.
And I was like, I literally had to argue with this like 50-year-old white guy who used to do all the international marketing at Universal, that like, yes, as a trend, not many people listen to albums anymore, but the genre of this band, people listen to albums. You'd be absolutely stupid not to release an album,
Yeah.
because so many mainstream pop artists will still write an album, but they'll just release like the 10 songs that would have gone on into an album as like a single every month for 10 months.
Yeah.
Um, and part of it is just because of the way that Spotify's algorithm works, especially if you're like a new artist. So if you're like a new artist and you're listening to this, basically you're trying to get fans and get more people to listen to your music. If you release a single in January and then people will start listening to it, and then if you get people listening to it, Spotify will automatically like clue into similar people that haven't heard it, that are similar to the people that have listened to it, then your song that you released in January will get put on Sheila's Discover Weekly, because
Yeah.
Sheila didn't hear the song when it came out. And that's great. And then Sheila listens to your January song, and Sheila's like, "Oh, this is amazing. Who is this artist? I want to hear more." So then, in order to like keep the Sheilas, you release another single in February, and then Sheila's like, "Oh my god, amazing!" And then that new song gets put into her New Music Friday playlist. And then
Yeah.
Sheila listens to it. She's like, "Oh, I remember hearing this January song, and this is from the same band, and this is also an amazing song." And it
Hmm.
basically just like builds it up and builds it up and builds it up, and it puts it into Discover Weeklies, and then it goes into New Music Fridays. But basically, you break the chain if you don't release a single like the next month, and like all the work that you've done up to that point to like get fans just basically goes out the window, and then you're back to square one. Which is
Hmm.
why loads of people have just started releasing singles, which is where this like myth about no one listens to albums kind of like originated.
Comes from.
So that's kind of, I don't want to say it is Spotify's fault, but it's definitely played like a part in like the devaluation of an album. But yeah, that's basically what I've been listening to. I'm trying to think. Reading. I mean, a lot of my books are all still in London, so I've basically just been like rereading all these like
Yeah.
fantasy YA books that I have at home that I've not read since I was like 16. I mean,
Yeah.
I started like writing about them. I think I got a bit ambitious with myself. I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be able to read one of these a week and then like write about it." It's this like 20 and 20 challenge that
Oh,
we were all doing at the
brave.
start of the year. And then I basically, which was fine in January, and then I went back to uni, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to read. It's not even like I had to read it from scratch. I was like, I don't have time to reread one of these whole books and make notes and then also put it into like a 300 to 500 word review every single week. So I basically
Yeah.
kind of like killed off that like series challenge, whatever you want to call it. But all of the books that I was
Hmm.
like planning on reading are like all still at home. So I've basically just been like rereading all of these books to try and decide whether they were actually any good or whether I was just a bit of an idiotic 16-year-old who thought that they were good. I Some of
Yeah.
them I've been pleasantly surprised by. Some of them I genuinely have sat there for a good hour after finishing and gone, why did I ever think that this book was good? Um, but yes,
Hmm.
that's kind of what I've been reading. I've not really been like watching too much TV because I've been in the garden doing loads of doing loads of gardening. So I've redone our garden, painted all the fences, like retiled the patio, planted loads of flowers. There was like 1 week when I felt like I was at a garden centre like every other day. And I was like, is this what it's like to be a grandma? Like, is this, it was kind of like having a glimpse into my future. And I don't know whether I'm like completely there for it or if I'm like, oh God. So that's basically what I've been doing to try and like fill my time in lockdown, I guess. I don't know whether you remember it. You know how there was that like weird couple of weeks in
Right.
March when some people were still touring, but then other artists were like cancelling
Oh yeah,
tours.
yeah, yeah.
And then it became this whole like,
Yes, I remember
oh,
this.
well, I need to tour because I have an entire touring crew that are relying on this money to pay their rent, versus this, oh, it's so
Yeah.
immorally wrong because everyone's going to go and then they're all going to get coronavirus. And then you're the one that's like responsible for making them go to your concert. And it was such a weird like 2 weeks
Yeah.
because in like live music and touring and stuff, it's normally like by the music industry anyway, it's seen as this like amazing thing that's like saved artists like incomes because it replaces their
Yeah.
lost income from like recorded music and stuff, which is great. And it's basically been this like band-aid like, it's not fixed the problem that recorded music income has
Yeah.
fallen, because they just replaced it with touring income, and no one ever really stopped to think about what happens when there's a pandemic and no one can tour.
You
And
can't talk.
suddenly everyone in music has sort of had to face this, like, "Oh, what do we do?" kind of like, it's been this, like,
Yeah.
massive, like, realization. And now there's, like, loads of, like, conversations about, like, how we're gonna get, like, live music, like, back again, because it's, like, it's so unsustainable. There's, like, independent venues are having to raise, like, £1 million, like, a month, otherwise they're not gonna be able to keep their doors open and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
there's, without a doubt, there's gonna be hundreds of thousands of independent venues that had to close when lockdown began, that are never gonna open their doors ever again. And it sucks and it's
Yeah.
awful. And it breaks my heart, because there's been so much, I mean, as it appears anyway, there's been a lot of aid and, like, advice and help given to a lot of industries, like, from the government and stuff. But there's been, like, nothing for music. Like, no one knows what the deal is. Like, no one knows how we're gonna be able to get, like, live music and, like, touring back to what it was in March, if we're ever gonna be able to get it back to what it was in March. Like, if small, like, independent venues are gonna be able to open, because a lot of the time they're used as, like, community centres as well. So there's one, the Boiler Room in Guildford, is primarily, like, a music venue and has, like, independent artists play it all the time, and it's such an amazing venue. I love it there so much. I'm lucky enough that that venue is basically, like, built my photography, like, portfolio, basically, so I couldn't be more thankful for it. But it's also used as, like, a community venue, so they offer, like, pub quizzes and, like, soup kitchens for, like, homeless people and all of this kind of stuff. But because they've had to shut because they're an events venue, none of those, like, community services that they'd normally do have been able to go ahead. And there's not the provision for them to go ahead, because they normally use money that they funnel from putting on gigs to offer these, like, community services. So obviously, even if they're allowed to reopen to offer these community services, there's going to be no income from gigs to, like, fund it. So, and, like, that's just one independent venue in the country, and there's, like, thousands that are in exactly the same position. And then you've got and then on the other hand, you've got some independent venues, like, there's this amazing independent venue in North London, and it's got a pub underneath, and then upstairs is, like, a 500 to 1,000 cap, like, gig venue. So there's also a load of independent venues that are like, okay, well, we've got a pub, but, like, is our pub gonna be able to open and our venue not be able to open? And then, like, what are we gonna do with that space upstairs that's just, like, sitting there, like, not being used? Like, are they gonna be able to make money off it? Because a lot of these pubs, like, the only reason that they, like, break a profit is because they put on events in these, like, venues. So even if the government are like, "Oh, pubs can reopen," like, they're still gonna be losing money. And there's just basically been, like, no kind of assistance or help or anything. So the fact as well that most touring crew that work on tours, whether you're a tour manager, who you could as a tour manager, you could earn, like, thousands of pounds if you're, like, a tour manager for, like, big bands that are touring, like, stadiums, to, like, backline crew and, like, riggers and, like, head of production and all of this kind of stuff. They're all, for the most part, they're all freelancers. So basically what happened was gigs stopped, lockdown happens, no more gigs, and everyone's like, "Oh, when our gig's going to be a thing again. I don't know what I'm going to do for a job. And then the government announced like the furlough scheme, and everyone in live music that's a freelancer, which is basically everyone, was like, okay, that's all well and good, but like what are we going to do? Like, is there any help for people that are like self-employed? And then obviously the government came out with the whole like self-employed help scheme, but you weren't going to be able to apply for it until June. So everyone that works on tours was like, okay, so we're not being paid because the tour's not happening. An entire summer of work as well for people that freelance at festivals has gone down the drain. And basically what had to happen is like big artists, like there was this like Crew Nation fund with Live Nation, and the music industry basically had to band together to pay the wages of all of these freelancers. And that's only like a small percentage. It will probably be about half to 3/4 of people that would have fallen under that. But I know so many people that weren't eligible to apply for this Crew Nation fund and were like on the phone to me in tears, being like, I don't know what I'm going to do until June. Like, how am I going to eat? And I don't know. I just think that it's such a tiny part of such a small industry that it's more convenient for like the government and stuff to just ignore it. I get that. But it's not been I understand as well that it's going to be hard to try and like help everyone. Of course, I understand that. But when an entire sector of an entire industry has been like taken out and there's like no help for them, that's when you kind of, I don't know, it's when you have to start like asking questions. So yeah, so that has sucked. But then there has been like some work, because a lot of artists have done like live streams. And like most artists have done them on like Instagram Live in their living room, like Chris Martin. And they've been like very low production. But then you have had a lot of like live streams. So I know there's been like international ones. So like the one that Lady Gaga did, and that was like broadcast like worldwide. So there would have a lot of like freelancers and like touring crew that had work cut, like would have been able to do stuff for that and would have been working behind the scenes. And then there's also been like super high production like live streams. So like Youngblood, for example, did that massive show, like live stream thing, in like March, and I think he's done another one as well. But like that was like a full production thing, so that was his like touring crew would have been like working then and stuff like that. So it has been this kind of like, it's basically exposed like what artists and bands actually care about their crew, based off like what the artists have done themselves to try and like help their crew with like income and stuff, essentially. Especially at like big level touring with like internationally famous artists who have the capacity to like pay their touring crew, but just like haven't, which raises a lot of eyebrows, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So it's a bit of a long one, so you've got to kind of bear with me. So you've got the podium at the daily briefing. You know, the one they do at like 4 or 5ish every day.
Yeah.
The eyes of the nation are on you. What would you want to say
Oh
to
my
them?
god, you've really put me on the spot. Heck. Oh goodness. I mean, first and foremost, I think I'd just want to be like honest about what was going on, because what's really done my head in about like all the daily briefings and everything has been how much they've like skewed data. So
Yeah.
I definitely like, I mean, I studied geography at A level as well, and like I've done stuff to do with politics. So it's like, you know what they're doing, like even when you're like watching it, and it
Yeah.
just makes you so annoyed. Like, it's just lying about stuff like that. It's not going to do anything for anyone. It's like you might as well just say, yes, this is how many people died today, and this is why. And it's because we've not done X, Y, and Z, but we're working on it, rather than like, oh, this is how many people died today, but it's okay because we're ordering antibody tests and then they don't work. Or, but it's okay because we've just ordered all this PPE from Turkey that we've not checked meets our PPE requirements, but it's fine because we've ordered it. And it's like, you'll hear the first half of the sentence, but not the other half. And I think that's what's annoying me most. So yeah, I think I'd just basically just be like honest about all the data and let people interpret it how they want to interpret it, rather than making people interpret it the way that we want to interpret it. And then I'd be like, see you lads, I'm off to Barnard Castle.
Awesome.
There you go. Yeah, that's how I'm going to end that.
Okay. So Sophie, where can people find you online?
People can find me online on Twitter at Oren_photos. And you can also find me on Instagram at Oren Photography with a underscore in between. Yeah, go check it out. My tweets are the best, honestly. I tweet much more than I post on Instagram, so follow me there.
So, thank you for joining me, Sophie.
That's okay.
You can find Voice online at voice.extra on Instagram to find the Instagram with the contributors, at VoiceMag UK on Instagram and Twitter for the main feed. So that'll be posting like articles, interviews, when there's like streams, stuff like that. And of course, you can find all the articles from me, Sophie, anyone else on voicemag.uk. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks to Kevin MacLeod for letting us use Shaving Mirror. You can find his stuff on incompetech.com.